What's up, guys? Welcome back to another program review. I am Jason Brown, the king of programming, and today we are doing something a little different. We're going to review a program I wrote 3 years ago. This program was written for people that were attempting to get back into the gym after having a layoff during COVID. So the name of this program is Return to Gym. You can get this program for free. I did this in collaboration with Ryan DeBell from the Movement Fix. So he did the mobility and warm-up sequences to this program, and I wrote the actual program. Now, we set this up where we made it very, very reasonable for people where they could essentially decide what they want to pay for this program. So really, in essence, you can get this program for almost free on themovementfix.com. On that website, I believe it's still there available. And if it's not, let me know in the comments, because I actually haven't looked at it in quite some time. And with that, I haven't looked at this program really since I wrote it. So it's been a minute since I've seen this program. But for those of you that are new, I start these videos off the same way. And I've got a few additional points that I want to include today. But just to give you some frame of reference, what I'm looking at exercise selection, exercise order, sets, reps, and rest intervals, conditioning. Is there any conditioning? Is there a clear intent to that conditioning? And then how this is set up within a week of training. So I'm looking at 1 week of training. Now, full disclosure, I am not doing a ton of extra research beyond that. I'm looking at 1 week of training. Whether or not the programming is consistent week to week or it varies, I don't know. I am looking at the 1 week and I'm looking at the fundamentals. So I cannot stress that enough. I'm looking at the fundamentals. Rest intervals, exercise order are fundamentals. Sometimes we see things that just make no sense, and maybe it is just overall missing a lot of different elements. And I've talked about that in a lot of the reviews, that it's missing specific things that are low-hanging fruit for most people. We know that people kind of fit into a box in terms of things that they need as far as strength, as far as aerobic conditioning. So those are things that we can play to, especially when we are delivering a program to the masses. I don't remember how many people we had download this, but it was in the thousands. So, I don't have much data on that, but I do know that when I wrote this program, my frame of reference was a little bit different than it is now. So I'm going to tell you exactly what I would do differently today, and I'm going to be as honest and as brutal as I would to anyone else's program. I think if you're not, being honest with what you're putting out and being open to feedback, then it's tough to really improve. And I will say that programming is one of the things that is constantly improving. We're getting new data points. We're able to iterate based on feedback we get. So if you're not evolving with that process, then you're likely going to get left behind. So always evolve, always take feedback, always iterate, and always be open to that criticism. Criticism sometimes is hard, but we need it to grow as human beings. So for today, I'm going to, again, be as honest as I can with you guys. Now, one thing I want to just mention, one thing I've seen is that we live in a day and age where people have a voice. You have things like Instagram and TikTok where people have a voice and they can get a substantial follower count from just voicing their opinion. Now, is their opinion accurate? Is it based on something legitimate? Is it based on legitimate credentials? Maybe not. I see a lot of people, most people that are in this industry that are haters, that are going around commenting and trolling on people's comments or posts, that is, to have no credentials. And a lot of people that are doing this, really have not earned the right to be giving someone else feedback because they haven't done it themselves. So this is something that we see as far as people will look at a follower count or they'll look at what someone's physique looks like and they'll use that as their gauge for credentials. Follower count and what someone's physique looks like is not equivalent to having reputable credentials or experience in the industry. So know that the two things are not synonymous. And I will tell you that I don't have a huge follower count, but I've been doing this stuff for a very long time, 2 decades now. And if you wanted to do your homework on me, you certainly could. I'm very open about my background and what I've done to get where I'm at. And this stuff, like I said, I try to make this as about the fundamentals more than anything else and less about my opinion. But I think that needs to be said. I know a lot of my colleagues have voiced concerns and just overall kind of discussed that people look at other people that have high follower count and a good physique and they say, okay, well, they probably have a great program, but know that the two things are not the same. So without further ado, let's get right into this. This program, a little bit of background, is made up of a lower body session, an aerobic conditioning session, a upper body session, another aerobic conditioning session, a full body session, then a 6th, kind of an optional aerobic conditioning session. Now, I use a lot of mixed modality style aerobic work because a lot of the people that were consuming this were former CrossFitters or people that have experience with CrossFit, and that was Ryan's audience, and that was also my audience. So it is a very specific person that is going to potentially be using this, and we'll see that in some of the movements that I choose for this conditioning, because if I was choosing these movements for someone that didn't have a background in CrossFit, it might be a mismatch. First thing to say here is that knowing what I know now, I would not have used this split. I would not use a hybrid split where we essentially have a lower an upper, and a full body day as our main strength sessions. I would have completely went away with that split, and I would have used a full body split for all 3 of those sessions. So radical change there. We're talking a different style of training altogether. Of course, there are going to be some similarities in terms of how those pieces are put together, but I would have used a different split. And why would I have used a different split as opposed to what I used here? Well, number one, someone easing back into training after a potential layoff. Full body is a great way to go because they're not going to have as much delayed onset muscle soreness, okay? There's not as much breakdown. The volume is more spread out over the course of the week as opposed to doing a full lower body session where essentially we do have a lot of muscle damage and a lot of soreness that does manifest days after those sessions. So that would be my first reason. Number two, a lot of people were sitting more than normal. They were home from work. They were on social media. They were, just in these positions of internal rotation and just getting weaker in areas they're already probably not that strong. So doing more foundational movement patterns, more squatting, lunging, hinging, and to get them out of those positions would have been a strategy I would use. And by doing that, I would have allowed for more frequency across the week as opposed to just doing it on one day. So that would be another strategy. Number three, it's very time efficient. So I like to keep these workouts a little bit shorter, especially for someone that's just getting back into it. And number four, we can ingrain good motor patterns. So those are some benefits of full body training. Now, a lot of people criticize full body training and say, well, is it enough to make a dent? And my unequivocal answer is yes, it is enough. It all depends on how you do it. What exercises are you doing? What is the intent of those exercises? Are you putting in maximal effort? Are you being honest with how many reps in reserve that you have? If you're doing something with 1 to 2 reps in reserve, it should be freaking hard. And by hard, I mean, you're near failure. That's being honest with it. But oftentimes we see that 1 to 2 reps in reserve for a lot of people is like actually more like 4 to 5 reps in reserve. So two very different things. And that's really a make or break to get the most from that. So out of the gate, that's the first thing I would change. I would change the split, but I will tell you, going off of memory, I would probably keep the conditioning similar to how I have it. Now, for day one, we've got a trap bar deadlift with 2 minutes rest. And I will tell you guys that in the notes, I tell people that I want them building in weight. Okay, so 2 minutes rest, not going to be enough for the later sets. It will be enough for the first few sets, but as we get towards set 4 or 5, probably not going to be enough rest. We probably want to bump that up to 3 minutes. So that's a small change that I would have made. But I will say that one of the things that we did say about this program is that we want to ease people in. So I'm not sure what my mindset was back then. Maybe I used 2 minutes rest just because I don't want them to go as heavy because they've had a long layoff. But what I would say is if I was going to change this now, I would do 2 to 3 minutes rest as my guide for that. We go from there with a single leg supported Romanian deadlift, which is a great variation. 3 sets of 6 to 8, rest 60 seconds. These are all straight sets, so they're not supersets, and you can see they're labeled A, B, C, and D, and E. And then we've got goblet box squat, which is a good variation to act as a teaching tool for the squat pattern. A lot of times, people need a tactile cue, especially if they're getting back into it. So this is a variation I chose for that reason. And of course, we've got some single leg work and some cable pull-throughs. Now, what I would say is I would probably go a little bit longer on the rest intervals across the board just because, again, someone's getting back into it. But I think overall, this is a pretty solid session. I hate to, be biased here and say that this is a great session. But what I would do is I would have used a full body day here, and this day would have looked different. Now, how would it look different? We would have done 1 squat, 1 hinge, or a single leg, 1 press, 1 upper pull. To be full body, you need 3 things. You need 1 lower body, an upper push, and an upper pull. That's technically a full body day. Now, I would go as far as saying that I'd like to see anterior, posterior with legs. So we see, something that's like a squat pattern, and then we see something like a hinge pattern. And to me, that would constitute just a little bit more effectiveness for what we're trying to do. But overall, I think this is a solid session. There are demo videos. There is a scale. If you don't have a trap bar, you could use a conventional deadlift, conventional rack deadlift. So trap bar, I tend to bias, especially with people that have low back issue, just because the center of mass is different. Their gravity line is different with that movement, and it allows people to really turn the trap bar deadlift into kind of more of a squatty deadlift, if you will, which to some coaches, that would be a disadvantage. To me, in most cases, it's an advantage just because, again, I want there to be less chance of that bar traveling forward and putting undue stress on their lumbar spine. So again, I think this is a solid session. What I potentially would have done, and this is the last point, we'll move on to the next, is I would have probably maybe reordered trap bar deadlift, single leg RDL as a second movement. I might have gone goblet box squat, then single leg RDL, then reverse lunge, and then cable pull through. And I would have, I probably would have actually put some core work in here as well. But I think we're getting to some core work on day 2, which is why I probably didn't put it on day 1. So let's get to day 2. So we've got a nice mix of work here. We've got farmer carry, so a loaded carry, an air bike sprint, and then we've got some cardio of your choice. So essentially, we're doing these all in a row, where we're doing farmer carries first, 30 on, 30 off for 10 rounds, and then we're doing air bike sprints, 10 hard, 50 easy for 10 rounds, and then we're doing some easy cyclical work to culminate the day, and then the day ends with some core work and some Russian kettlebell swings. So I will tell you, we did have a lot of questions on the session. I think there was some confusion with this, so I think we probably could have done a better job of structuring this so there was less questions. So what I would do is I would do air bike and farmer carries, and I would put them as a couplet. So we would do air bike and then farmer carry, and then we'd rest. And in this case, I would probably keep the rest lower than you might think, 60 to 90 seconds, just because I don't want super heavy loads of the farmer carry. I want it to be more aerobic. I don't want people to be pushing super hard on those air bike sprint either. So that's one way that we can control the reliance on just substrates with dictating what the rest interval is. So shorter rest interval is obviously going to make it where we're not able to go at maximal effort and keep it more on the aerobic system. So that's how I would have done that. And then the easy cardio at the end, I probably would have put that at the very end of the day and not where it is here. And then we would have, and in all honesty, what I would do with this session now, actually seeing the whole thing, I would take the Russian swings and the hollow rocks and I'd put that in. So we'd have a conditioning piece of farmer carries, air bike for calories, hollow rocks, Russian swings, and then we'd rest between those rounds, and then we'd culminate the day with some easy cyclical work. And it would probably be 10 to 20 minutes. So that's what I would do to improve this, to make it a little bit more clear, to make it so people are not asking a ton of questions about it, and it's very straightforward. And I think it would be a little bit more fun if I did it that way. So again, that's what I would do if I was to rewrite this. I would take that session and it would look something like, maybe 40, 30, 20, 10 of calories on the air bike, Russian swings, hollow rocks, and then farmer carry, I would probably go with 100 to 200 feet after each round. So obviously there's no rep count or calorie component to that. So I would just go with a designated amount of feet. That way we're doing 4 sets of 200 feet with a moderate load. And then essentially we have all the stuff in one thing versus having to spread it all out over the place. There's certainly some advantages to doing it this way, but I think just for simplicity's sake and to make it a little bit more fun, that's probably how I would do it. One thing I talk about a lot, guys, is sometimes if we trade some effectiveness for fun, we can get more compliance long-term from people. Now, there is a lot of research now with rest intervals and people resting really long between sets, and I certainly think there's a time and place for that. Like I mentioned here with a trap bar deadlift, I would increase that rest interval, but if you're resting 2 to 3 minutes after every single exercise and you're only doing one exercise at a time, of course, it's a little bit more plain. It's a little more vanilla where you're not going to be, doing supersets or anything like that. So I think that having some element of fun to the training too, obviously challenging, giving people what they need, but balancing that out with a little bit of more fun is a good way to increase compliance long term. All right, so let's move on to day 2. So day 2, we have a neutral grip dumbbell floor press. We have chin-ups, and there's already a few things I would do differently with this day. So we've got neutral grip dumbbell floor press. I would probably put after the chin-ups. The chin-ups say accumulate 25 reps, which is fine. That's good volume for a chin-up, but it says rest as needed. I don't love that. I would have liked to see 90 seconds to 2 minutes rest. And then I do have a scale here if they're not able to do chin-ups. But in reality, we could have supersetted these two things and go back and forth between the floor press and the chin-up and get a little bit more from it. I would probably superset the two, go 60 seconds after the floor press, and then do 4 sets of 6 for the chin-up, 60 seconds after that. So essentially we're resting a total of 2 minutes before we get back to that first exercise. And that's how I would have done the first 2 pairing, or it's singular exercise here, but I would have done it as a pairing. And then we've got a pairing of some rollbacks, so some accessory work for the triceps, chest supported row. I have no issues with that. I actually probably will go a little bit less volume just because, again, people are coming back to the gym. So 3 sets of 10 to 12, perfectly fine. Cable face pull, I would have rested a little bit longer. And then we've got a side plank where we're going 20 left, 20 right, and then resting 40. So essentially that's 40 seconds on. 20 seconds right, 20 seconds left, and then rest 40 seconds. I would have done essentially 20 seconds, and then rest 60. So overall, a little bit different structure to this day. I don't think that this is a particularly bad day, but I would do it a little bit differently and make it a little bit more concise now, especially with, just some small changes that we can make to make this a better session. Now, day 4, this is our aerobic session. I will be honest, I don't love the design of this program. The designer we have do it, she's actually a great designer, does a lot of my programs, but I think it's a little bit hard to understand just from the way it looks. So I've got 10-minute jog, bike, a row, and then 10-minute jog, bike, a row. So different, so cyclical piece. Again, this is aerobic, and we want to keep this around 70%, which is good. So it should, and I said the pace should be conversational. And then we've got some band work. I love band work because of a lot of reasons. Number one, just about anyone can do it. It requires almost no skill to do band work. Number 2, we can accumulate a ton of volume. There's a ton of benefits in terms of just improving tendon strength, improving explosiveness of tendons, elasticity, a lot of great things with band work. And there's a reason why, Louis Simmons has talked about band work over the years, doing high volumes of band work. You're not getting tension through full range, so there's a benefit there in terms of accumulating just repetitions with that. And again, I like it because it's low barrier to entry. Anyone can do it and most likely do it correctly. complete. So we've got push downs, pull aparts, and then banded leg curl. So I mean, I love that. This is something I still prescribe, and I have 100 reps. So it's 40, 30, 20, 10 of all three of those movements where we're going through that at a continuous pace until it's complete. So again, I would just clean this up, make this a little bit more, I would probably make this a little bit sexier too. I think just telling someone to do 10-minute bike, 10-minute row, I think they're likely to skip that because it doesn't look like a real training session. So what I would have done is I would have taken those cyclical pieces and I would have paired some body weight movements, some additional things in there to make it look more like a training session. I would have spread it out a little bit longer as well. I probably would have gone 30 to 40 minutes, and that's how I would potentially adjust that day. Now, day 5 is our full body day. I really like the looks of this day. We're doing pairings across the board. It's organized. I like the rest intervals. There's really nothing I would change from this. We have a rear foot elevated split squat, 6 reps per leg. We're resting 60. Then we're hitting our half kneeling landmine press for 6 to 8 per arm, resting 60. And then we've got one arm row. We've got a sumo stance, barbell RDL, and then a goblet squat, as well as a barbell curl. So overall, there's not a whole lot I would change about this day. You know, potentially if I was to nitpick, I might move the sumo stance barbell RDL and use a different variation or move it earlier in the session. But because we're not building to heavy weights with this, we're basically doing this more of an accessory based session. I think that the way it is perfectly fine. But again, if I'm nitpicking, I might move that sumo stance barbell RDL a little bit earlier in the session. I think that might improve the session, a little bit here. But overall, I think this is pretty solid. Not a whole lot I would change there. Now let's look at day 6. We've got a mixed modality style piece where we're doing 3 movements. So a triplet. We've got dumbbell push up, dumbbell hang power clean and push press, and a 400 meter run. And then we are culminating the day with some 20 minutes of easy conversational cyclical work for the aerobic system. This is a really nice piece. I like this. I think that people that have a CrossFit background will enjoy it. It adds a level of novelty, but we're using dumbbells, which, again, nice compliment. If we're going to do things like Olympic lifts, I like using kettlebells. I like using kettlebells more than dumbbells, but in this case, we use dumbbells, and I think it's a pretty decent session. Reps of 30, 20, 10, so 60 total reps, and then 3 sets of a 400 meter run, but we're doing that essentially for time. Okay, so again, overall, I like this day. I potentially would make it a little bit longer. I think this program could definitely benefit from having a little bit longer aerobic sessions. And again, if we're going to ask people to do 10-minute bike, 10-minute, any type of cyclical piece, you're going to have more compliance if you add in some other elements to make it a little bit sexier. And again, that's kind of one of the things. This stuff, some of the aerobic stuff, it's not sexy, but if we as coaches can find ways to trick people into doing it, to make it look a little bit sexier, they'll end up doing it. And guess what? They get better results long term. So that's just something for you guys to think about. And that's it. That's the first week of programming here. As I said, you guys are more than welcome to go to that site. Like I said, I'm not sure if it's still up, but by the time this video posts, I'll probably know the answer to that. I still think this is a solid program. We had a lot of people get phenomenal results. I actually had, I think, 2 one-on-one clients that ended up working with me for years after doing this program. So they came from this program that we put out essentially for free and end up working with me for years thereafter. So putting out free stuff like this is always a great way to get your information out there, to also build trust with people. If someone does this program and they get great results, they're gonna have a much higher potential of trusting me and wanting to work with me as their coach, maybe long term. So anyways, just kind of a side note there. But this program is of course approved, and I would love to get more recommendations from you guys. And as I said, we've got a lot of great reviews coming. So we'll see you on future reviews.
Best program available on the internet today.
I think it's very difficult to find a trainer like Jason that...
Since joining Everyday Heroes, I feel like I've stopped working out and actually started training.